Hello and welcome to tutorial number 4. So today we're making Flappy Bird, which is the game that once made 50,000 a day for its owner. So let's first drag the graphics, and I will give you the link to the graphics in description. This is from GitHub. You should just press code button and you will see download zip option. So here's our graphics, and what we should do, we should select everything, and we should basically change the texture type to sprite 2D, because we just want to use it as sprites, and by default it's more like textures. That's the settings that we need. Apply, and let's see what we can drag now. So we should drag background, and let's see our camera, I would say, because we don't see anything yet. So we switch to the scene view and we already see it. Yeah, let's drag the base, which is basically our foreground, and move it a bit to the front. Probably it's a bit too much to the front, but yeah, okay. Let's move start window. This is basically the entry point of the game, and game over text, which is just shown when you lose, basically. So switch to 2D view, and we still don't see anything, but let's change the aspect ratio because we do it for mobile, kind of. You can see I have it 9:16 already. Let's create it just for the demonstration purpose. 9:16 and call it Flappy. Okay. And that's what your camera will be basically going for. So let's just set the camera to the correct position. It already looks in the correct direction, but it's too close, so nothing is actually shown. So let's do it -10 by Z coordinate. -2 is probably also okay. And set it to orthographic and just correct the size. But yes, first set it to -5, so it's a bit further so we can fit more stuff in case of layers. Yeah, 253 for this looks fine. It covers the whole thing. Let's drag the bird because it's our main character, and if we select all 3 frames and drag it on the bird object, it will actually propose us to create animation and animator. So it's bird anim, save it, and once you'll run it, you will see the bird animating. And let's set up the pipes. So here is our pipe. It's move it to the front, and okay, that's good enough. It's in front of background, but behind the foreground. So create empty object because pipes will come in packs of 2. So move it here, yes, and create another one. Flip it over Y coordinate because yeah, they look into each other, at least it's supposed to. I would just center it now, so we don't need to bother too much. Yep. And center the whole object also. Looks better. Yeah, even though the pipes are in front. And let's just position them at some levels that we have a small gap between 2 pipes, so it's just enough for the bird to fly through. So let's just try different values until we more or less find something that fits. So -2 is close, I would say. I'll probably give it a bit more space, but let's first disable the objects that we don't need enabled in the beginning and that block our view. Yeah, probably a bit more, not 25, 2.5 too much, 2.1, and on the other one also 2.1. One is -2.1, another one is 2.1. That looks much better. Let's drag it into this project folder, and we get the pipes prefab and delete it from the scene because we don't really need it in the scene. we also need to create canvas, and we need that to display our score, so we will just show some text, and this text will display just a digit. So let's call it score, and let's position it correctly. So pivot will be center top. Let's increase the size so it basically fits our text. Center it, put it to the top. -100 probably too much. -20 looks fine, but let's increase the font size. Yeah, 100 is okay. No, I think it will be actually too big for the digit. You don't want to see the score that big. 72, maybe even smaller. 64, yes, that's fine. -40 is also fine, I think. Color, switch to white. Let's make the text bold. And let's create material for our background and foreground, because what we want to do later, basically, to fake the movement, we want to move the texture on the background and foreground to the left. We do that by adding a material to these objects, and we switch shader to unlit texture. And you can see this there is parameter offset, so when we move offset, it moves the texture. But right now the texture is set up wrong, because you see that it basically doesn't repeat itself. So we go to the textures that we're interested in and set the wrap mode to repeat. So now we press apply, and when we try it again, we change the offset, and you can see that it just loops more or less when we move. And that's what we need to create an illusion of movement while being static, because everything that we do is technically on one screen. So message should be enabled, game over should be disabled. But let's first run the game and see. So we have just birds that animates all the time. That's all we have right now. I think our base is too high, so let's move it a bit down. Something about that. And let's add colliders to our object, because this time we'll use physics. So we need the collider on the bottom. We need the collider on the bird. And we also need rigid body on the bird. Rigid body responsible for physics on our objects. So basically that's the thing that allows us to do some gravity. So we can set up gravity scale to half, which means that it will just fall down at half speed. And let's add box colliders to our pipes. Perfect. You have to use box collider 2D because we're making 2D game, and it's just more reasonable this way. And that way it ignores that order completely. So that coordinate, and it just more or less measures X and Y. We need to add this score registering collider, which is used as trigger. Triggers are registering if something touches it, but not really reacting like collider. Collider blocks movement and trigger allows to move through. So yeah, let's make it just small and put right behind the pipes. So don't forget to set is trigger. And that's how we're going to use it to count the score. So once the character enters this trigger, it means that he passed a tube, so he has to increase his score. So let's set the canvas to camera space and set distance to 1. Okay, so it looks like it perfectly fits even in scene with the settings. Because if you leave it with 100 or default overlay setting, it's just too big. So let's try our game one more time. And this time the bird falls on the ground, so colliders are working and the gravity from rigid body also works. Let's create our first script and let's do a game manager script as always we do. We do it only because it's like small games and we need one main script to manage everything. On big projects that doesn't work this way, I would say. So here's our script. Let's create some variables that we need. We need to keep track of our sprites for background and for foreground, so we create a variable of type sprite renderer so we can access a material easier later for background, and copy that and do the same for foreground. Let's also create an instance of a class that approach is called singleton. That's one of the not complete implementations of that. So basically you create an instance of this class and then assign it in awake, and then you can access everything you want from this class, which is public, just by accessing GameManager.instance, because static means that it can be accessed everywhere, more or less. So let's keep reference to our bird, but to our bird's rigid body. And let's just react to the input because we want our bird more or less to jump once we press the button. So we do it by writing if, and as our condition we use input.get mouse button down, and it should be mouse 0. And then we change the bird's velocity to vector2 up, and we multiply this vector by some speed that we will just define. So it should be some float that we can adjust. If we don't like the speed, we can make it faster. Technically it's not really a speed, it's more like force, so let's rename it. Yeah, that sounds good. So every time we press mouse button 0, which is left mouse button or just touch, we will change the velocity of the bird to vector up multiplied by speed. So we drag our script onto main camera, and let's drag all our references, so background to background, base to foreground, and bird to bird. And we have to set our force, let's set it to something like 2. And let's try. So here is what happens when we click. Yep, it doesn't feel too good, honestly. Takes too much time to fly up. Let's change it. 3.5, I think it's fine. That's better in case of flying up, but it's flying then too slow. So let's change back gravity to 1, so it's full gravity. Start the game, and yeah, that actually feels like Flappy Bird. So we're on the right track, I would say. So we can fly up, fall, basically do whatever we need to do when we play Flappy Bird. Let's go back to our script and add some more code. So we also need a reference to entry window. Basically the message says start your game by clicking. And we need a boolean to keep the info if we started the game or not already. So let's add some code in update. And if we haven't started the game yet, we should just return Basically, we will skip every other code in update. So when you return, you stop this function, which is update, and don't continue. But let's also do something when we want to start the game. So let's create function start game. And in this function, we should enable entry message. Disable it. And enable the bird, because once we started it, the message should go off and the bird should be enabled. And we should set the flag of game started to true, so we can track it and know that the game has already started at that point. And let's create a reference to the text for our score, because we need to keep score and it's type text. We need to also use unityengine.ui on top. And let's enable our score once we start the game. And in update, let's copy our mouse thingy. So if we get a click when the game hasn't started yet, then let's remove what we had and let's call start game. Let's drag our references. So we need a reference to entry message and we need a reference to the text. Yeah, enable it by default and drag reference to the text. Okay. Score disabled by default. So we have everything good, and disable the character. And let's try. We press and we can now play the game. So for now we're just flying and nothing else happens. Let's go back to our code. So we need to also reference the pipe prefab so we can spawn it, so the bird can fly through it. We need to create a coroutine for that. So we spawn a prefab with some delay and we spawn it more or less infinitely, basically until we die. So to make it infinitely, we just do while true, which means that whatever is in the while will be repeated until this coroutine stops or until we delete the object. So we will instantiate our prefab and save it in the new pipe object. Then we wait for 2 seconds until we do it again. So it will go create, wait for 2 seconds, create, wait for 2 seconds, create, wait for 2 seconds. And it will do it infinitely. And we need to destroy our pipes at some point, because if we just keep spawning them, we'll get out of memory, or the game will lag because we have like 1,000 objects. So let's destroy our pipe, let's say in 50 seconds. So we have to start our coroutine and we have to start our pipes when we start the game. So we add it to start game. We start coroutines by calling start coroutine on them. Let's create a script and call it pipes. So what we need to do, we need to position the pipe at starting position once it's created, and it will be about 3 by x, and then for y coordinates we will set a range from the points that I looked into the game. Basically it's from -1.2 to 0.7, so it will not be always the same position, but it will be still in our screen area, and it will be possible to actually go through this hole for our player. And we have to also move our pipes in update to the left, and we can set up the speed with which we move it. 0.05 should be fine. We do it by changing the position every frame, but also it's better if we do time.delta time, so it will change in a second by 1 unit left. Time delta time more or less gives you the time between this frame and previous frame. So we add pipes component to our pipes prefab and we start the game. Let's see. Okay, we have an error. The variable pipe prefab of game manager has not been assigned. You can see it on the bottom left, or when you click on console, for example, you can also see that. So let's just assign it on our game manager, drag the prefab, and we can try again. Okay, this time it works. Yeah, we can see that our bird is pretty dumb and it hits everything but doesn't die, but we'll fix it later. So we can technically play our game now, even though it doesn't count our score. It's already pretty difficult. So let's create a script for our bird. Let's call it just bird. Let's remove start and update because we won't need it. What we need to do on the bird, we need to register collisions and trigger entries. So there are specific methods for that. One is on trigger enter, and in our case it should be on trigger enter 2D because we use 2D physics. There is on collision enter 2D also, which we'll use later. So let's create a score count, and every time we enter a trigger we increment this score count by 1, so we increase it by 1, and then we also update the text on the counter. Okay, to string, so we convert int to string, so we get a text and then we assign it to the text variable. Alright, let's drag our bird to our bird. That's good. And this is the object that basically is set to trigger, so every time our bird collides with this trigger, then this happens. So let's start and see what happens. Yep. So we passed 1, we have 1, we have 2, we have 3, 4. We would die already, so that's kind of a god mode. But you can see that it works. Every time you actually pass and enter this area that's supposed to be this invisible trigger, your score increases. So let's get back to our code. Let's create game over flag so we know when the game is lost. Basically, It should be when the bird hits anything, and reference to our game over text. So if the game is over, then we should enable the text. And if we click the button while the game is over, we should load this scene again. So basically start from scratch. Scene 0 is our current scene. We would have to edit in build settings, so file build settings, and there will be a button add current scene to the list of scenes. When you press it, you will see that there will be your scene with index 0, and 0 is what we are loading. And if you have nothing there, it will also work, because 0 will be this scene, I think. So what we else need to do is to shift our background, basically to create moving backgrounds while everything is static. Remember, we used this offset in the beginning, and we have to access this part of the material by going through background.material. Background is sprite renderer, so sprite renderer has access to material, and material has access to its main texture offset. And then we just increase this offset by some small value on X. And we should do the same for foreground, but foreground is faster because things that are closer to you should move faster. So let's just do like 3 times the speed. And we call it an update at the end. So basically every frame it will move the background. And we should not continue if we are dead, so none of this will be executed when we are dead. Return will basically exit the update at this point and will not continue. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. Oops. 1, 2, 3. Sounds and looks good. You can see the background which is scrolling, and you can see how buggy the game is right now. So we need to add something on top, but the background works. So now let's try to actually die. So we had on trigger enter, now we need on collision enter 2D. And when the collision is entered, we need to set the game over flag to true. That would mean that game's over and we are dead. Let's create an empty object and add collider on top so we don't go over everything. Increase the size, fit it so it's over the camera and it looks good. Let's try. So 1, 2, and we're dead and something is wrong. So we see the error again in console. Yeah, we didn't assign the game over message, and once it tried to access it, it crashed. So the script stopped working because it couldn't continue. Let's start again. Alright, that's actually pretty difficult, but you can see that everything kind of moves even if you're dead, so we need to fix it. So let's jump into our code, into pipes, and let's check is game is over, and if it is, then we should basically return from update and not continue, basically without executing this transform position plus equals. So it won't move, it won't reach this point if the game is over. And let's try to increase the speed of pipes a little bit. That's probably too fast. Yeah. And also game over text is behind, so let's fix that. Let's just set it to something higher, like -4. And let's just keep the speed at normal. Move the bird a bit to the left so we have more time to prepare for our obstacle. And that's our game, I would say. As you can see, it's not that easy to play it. I can't even pass the first pipe, but I will play until I can. If you like this tutorial, subscribe to my channel and you can watch my other tutorials. You can also watch my dev vlogs where I make a programming game. It's a game about robots fighting on arena. And sometimes I have just different things about game devs that you might like. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helps you to develop your skills. You can find the assets by the link in the description and see you in the next video.